Welcome to Green Guardians, Fueling India's Energy Transition, an initiative by India Business and Trade, where we explore the visions and perspectives of thought leaders contributing to clean energy revolution in India. I am Aishu Bhardwaj, Assistant Editor at IBD, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Mr. Vivek Saraf, Founder and CEO of SunSeed APV. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Hello.
So, to talk about the solar sector, it is no doubt that the sector has achieved remarkable growth in the recent years in India. So much that India has emerged as one of the world's largest solar markets, attracting both domestic and international investments. Not just this, more and more startups are coming up with newer innovations to push the sector further, and one such startup is Sunseed APV. So, sir, to start, let's talk about the inspiration behind your venture. What motivated you to create Sunseed APV?
Yeah. Thanks, Aishu, for having me here. And so before I tell you what motivated me to start this venture, just quickly tell you what we do. So Sunseed APV is into agrivoltaics, which is the co-location of agriculture with solar generation. So it's something, it's a nascent field application of solar, kind of being led by Europe at this moment, and then catching up globally. So that's with that backdrop, so just I started this in a few years ago, 2020, late 2020. And but prior to that, I was in the solar space for the previous 4 or 5 years as well. And that's where I was with a company that was doing niche solar projects like over canals, carports, over roads. So we've done a few canal projects in India. And so I was already in this space of doing solar with multiple benefits, right? So not just, a ground-mounted solar generating clean energy, but doing other stuff as well. So agrivoltaics was also something that I was very keenly following. And I was kind of keeping myself up to date with the research that was going on in Europe. And in 2020, I just felt that the time was right. I was myself convinced that this is something that would work, and especially in India, I really saw that this could have really good value proposition. So that's when I started this company with the goal to create solutions and develop projects.
All right, sir. Moving on to my next question. With the solar sector experiencing significant growth, competition is undoubtedly fierce. So, how does your company differentiate itself from existing players in the market?
Right. So now, if you look at the whole solar space, so it's extremely competitive, right? So I mean, it's like somewhat like the airline industry, right, where nobody really makes good money. So the developers are all, it's a race to the bottom in terms of bidding for tariffs, and then that just flows through the value chain, with everybody being squeezed on their profit margins. Now, obviously, what we are doing is very different. So, as such, there's no one else really at this moment. So, there's a lot of talk about agrivoltaics in India right now. It's like becoming a buzz, but it's like just no one's really done work on it yet. So, there's very few projects that have been done. There's no real company that's actually saying, "Hey, we got these special solutions for agrivoltaics," which we do have, a few of them. So I think we're very uniquely positioned that way. But on the flip side, there's, I mean, the market is almost non-existent. So that market has to be built, So we're kind of, we have the double challenge of, not just doing a startup, but then building the market as well. But that's going like, quicker than we anticipated. And the government is very keen to promote agrivoltaics, and you'll soon see policies to that effect.
Yes. So, the next question would be, as an entrepreneur, surely you have faced challenges during the earliest years of your startup. So, I wanted to know insights, your insights into the hurdles you encountered and the impact you have achieved thus far.
Right. So, I mean, as an entrepreneur, like, when you want to build some solutions, build a company, um, you know, one big challenge is the money, right? And so far we've grown organically. We actually got into a partnership with a with a German development agency. So together we've been actually doing some projects, and so the funding coming from that really helped as well. So it's with GIZ, we're partners with them in doing some projects. And then there's the whole thing about the team, right? So I was lucky to actually you know it's been a nice journey doing that. The other thing is obviously developing solutions for a market that's very nascent, right? So that obviously is there. So that's an additional challenge. But luckily, that's going well. And so there's, as I said earlier as well, a lot of projects. So this, the backdrop that you see is one of the projects we did in Maharashtra recently.
Okay. Well, all the best to you, sir. And again, it is truly inspiring how you're overcoming all the challenges and coming out as a great startup. Moving on to my next question. What would be the vision of SunSeed and your growth strategy going forward?
Right. So so what we're, so our vision is to build, hundreds of megawatts of agrivoltaics projects. And in doing that, kind of own not just the solar but the agriculture as well. So we want to actually build a brand of agriculture produce. So we'll focus on certain crops and kind of build a brand where we would be selling that produce.
Mhm.
And specifically, we're looking to focus on two aspects. So, like agrivoltaics could also be very broad, right? There's many ways of co-locating agriculture with solar, and there's some with very little extra capital costs, but with very limited agriculture. And then there's stuff where the capital costs can be much higher, but then, the scope for doing the agriculture increases as well. So we're focusing on the latter. So what we've built a few products which integrate climate controlled cultivation with solar generation. And in doing that, you can grow like really high value crops. So our vision is to create such parks of agrivoltaics with climate controlled in the peripheries of urban areas, right? So there's a lot of, like, even if you look at Delhi, there's a whole green belt, a lot of farming happening. If you take the center of Delhi and go like an hour and a half radius, then there's a lot of agriculture. So kind of do in urban areas or close to urban areas so that you can sell the high value produce that comes out of these climate controlled cultivations. And then another thing that we really, which we haven't done too much yet, but is definitely part of a long-term strategy, is to do rooftop agrivoltaics as well. So we have figured out a whole kit for doing organic farming under solar panels and a rooftop setup. So kind of co-locating rooftop solar with urban farming, which is also something that's been gaining traction of late. So that's kind of our, two things that we're looking to do. But then apart from that, all this is possible because of the technology solutions that we built, right? We would be able to do such projects because of that technology. And there's two aspects of that technology. One is um, the software decision support system that we've made based on a digital twinning strategy, where we can simulate the light distribution and the microclimate under any configuration of solar panels or protected cultivation. And and at the same time, we're doing a lot of research to figure out what the crops need. So what kind of light distribution do they need? Like, most crops don't need all the light that comes in, especially in a place like India where we have a lot of radiation. So we're trying to, you know, attacking it on both ends. First, create simulation, and then also figure out what the crop needs, and then you map the two. So that's those. So that's a service also that we're already kind of providing globally, and that's also so create a product, a software product that we could like kind of become the PV syst of, if you may say, for agrivoltaics. So that's kind of the overall vision. So we're very, early days, but yeah, so far going well.
All right, sir. So now I wanted to ask you an interesting question based on the current landscape of investment. Uh, so the clean energy startups have become increasingly appealing to the investors these days. And I wanted to know what factors do you think make these ventures interesting or attractive?
So I think clean energy, was very attractive, like, maybe 7, 8 years ago. Then it's a bit of a lull in terms of startups because, there's people doing, there has to be some innovation, something new, for a startup to get funded, right? So now, obviously, now, there's, I think, a very renewed interest, globally, to take solar energy, renewables, and specifically solar to the next level, right? So you've done a lot of, solar till now, but then there's now a new push to take it, that whole net zero concept. So there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money out there, hopefully, right? So we're going to start pitching very soon. So I'm hoping that there's money out there for, especially for startups like us. But yeah, I think just the whole global environment and focus on sustainability. I think the money should be there. Yeah.
All right. And we will move to our final question.
Mhm.
So, what recommendations would you provide to the government to further accelerate the development and adoption of clean energy solutions in the country?
Right. So um, I'll kind of keep my answer to agrivoltaics because that's the area of expertise I have. So here, I think to enable projects to happen, so there needs to be, some policy, enabling policy that allows for it. Like right now, most projects, right, the land use changes to industrial, and so the government does have a policy like Kusum where it does enable it. But there too, I think it's important that there's like, more clarity on certain aspects, and especially like, with the current environment, like dealing deals with farmers where we lease their land, and there could be other aspects of that deal. We need to be kind of convinced that there'll be legal sanctity, right? And so that's one aspect, and then there's, some minor approval related stuff, but I don't think there's much that the government needs to do now. Initially, maybe they could provide some viability gap funding because there's high capital costs upfront. Now, in our model, and we truly believe that you don't need any subsidy. In fact, what we're talking about is an increase in equity IRRs for developers. So it's a win-win for farmers, employment generation, developers can get better IRRs. But still, initially, because there's a higher capital cost involved, so people, before plunging in, they would want to see numbers. So till then, for a few years, some viability gap funding to take care of at least some part of the additional capital cost, that would be really good. And I do believe that they're thinking on these lines. I know there's consultations happening at the MNRE and at different state renewable agencies, and I believe they are thinking on these lines. Yeah.
All right, sir. I think this was a great chat with you, Mr. Saraf, and we really want to thank you for joining us. As we conclude, it is quite evident that Indian solar sector is going to attain more growth as we move forward, and it is going to push startups like SunSeed further. So thank you again for joining us. And for our audience, that's all for today's episode of Green Guardians. Join us next time as we bring more stories, more inspiring stories to you right from the forefront of India's clean energy revolution. Stay tuned.